This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you are in the future because you're listening to Cristina Gomez and Shifting the Paradigm.
This is Ray Sobbs from the UnX Network, and you're listening to Shifting the Paradigm with the intrepid Cristina Gomez on the X.
Shifting the Paradigm. Welcome. I'm Cristina Gomez on the Paradigm Shifts channel and on the X, the UnX Network, KUNX Digital Broadcasting. Are you ready for this? I'm officially pumped that this is the first show now being distributed by KUNX Race Hobbs. So things are going to be a little different from previous shows. The format is now longer, and I get to hang out with listeners and go over news items and other good stuff before we go into the interviews with guests from now on. So let's get started for an hour and a half of UFO shenanigans and paranormal adventures. Right here is where we look and think outside the proverbial box. We jump down those rabbit holes where you get a red Tic Tac instead of a red pill. How is everyone? Happy Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on where you're listening. Tonight, coming up at the bottom of the hour, is my guest, former police lieutenant and current CEO of The Debrief Media, Mr. Tim McMillan. But first, let's get into some space news and unusual news stories from this last week. First story is about a dolphin called Casper. An extremely rare white dolphin has been spotted several times recently in Monterey Bay on the Californian coast. It's been seen going after its food of choice, squid. I mean, that's not something I would ever eat myself, but good for Casper. So it's also been seen leaping out of the water. This type of dolphin is called a Rizzo, but to have one that appears as an albino is rare. But it has been puzzling marine biologists because it doesn't have the typical pink or red eyes that accompany albino dolphins. Instead, they think Casper has a genetic mutation called leucism that inhibits skin coloring, among other things. Talking about things in the ocean, remember that nuclear-powered U.S. submarine that had a collision with something while in the South China Seas back on October the 2nd? Well, the U.S. 7th Fleet released a report stating that the USS Connecticut, a Sea Wolf-class fast attack submarine, collided with an uncharted seamount and not another vessel. So that's the story. But curiously, A similar incident occurred back in 2005, as reported in Popular Mechanics. The USS San Francisco, another nuclear powered attack submarine, hit an uncharted seamount in Guam, which injured almost all of the 137-person crew and killed one. That's so tragic. And fortunately, nobody was seriously hurt or killed this time. In other news, which seems more fatal? Death from a physical accident or death by a parasite? Scientists at the University of Nottingham in the UK have discovered a deadly parasite known to cause ill health in pregnant women and immunocompromised patients that could potentially be used to treat various types of cancers, stop tumor progression, and prolong the lives of patients. The researchers have shown that direct injection with this mutant parasite in solid tumors induces inflammatory responses in the injected tumors and even in tumors located in a distant location in the body of mice test subjects. They have also shown that this treatment approach has made tumors more responsive to treatment with immune checkpoint inhibitors. This dual treatment significantly extended the survival of mice and reduced tumor growth in mouse models of melanoma, Lewis lung carcinoma, and colon adenocarcinoma. While this may be groundbreaking research, let's go into some space news. Jeff Bezos, with his space company Blue Origin, has been going after NASA in a legal battle after it chose Elon Musk's SpaceX for a single human landing system award. However, the Court of Federal Claims has ruled against Blue Origin. In its suits, Blue Origin argued that NASA ignored a requirement that bidders include a flight readiness review before the launch of each element of the lander systems. SpaceX failed to do so for each of its Starship tanker launches, but NASA did not disqualify SpaceX's proposal. In a one-page filing, November 4th, Judge Richard A. Hertling granted a motion by the federal government, the defendant in the case, to dismiss the case filed by Blue Origin in August. However, NASA is under pressure by some in Congress, notably Senate appropriators, to include a second company in the HLS program, something that Blue Origin hinted at in its own statement. The company stated, "We look forward to hearing from NASA on the next steps in the HLS procurement process." While traveling amongst the stars for the layman may seem far away, in the movie Dune, it makes space travel look desirable. So, how many of you have seen the new movie Dune? I just finished watching it this week and I had to watch it over a couple of days, breaking up my time to sit back and watch just because it's such a long movie. And I was pretty excited to watch it after watching the original movie from 1984 and the TV show from 2000. The videography was stunning. The costumes, the casting, I mean, everything was fabulous. And for those that have seen the movie can probably agree with me. The whole production had a timeless and haunting essence that was very smooth in its plot transitions. And, I thought the special effects were epic. I mean, second to none. And the character development was flawless for the main characters. But right when I was getting into it, like really deeply into it, eating my popcorn, like laying in the back of my chair, boom, it just ends with the words, "It's just the beginning." And I was like, "No, you can't do that. That's like against the law. You can't end a movie and then say, 'It's just the beginning.'" Oh, geez. So I immediately jumped on Google, like probably most of us did, to see when part 2 was coming out. And I read, I was very disappointed. I read that I have to wait. No, that we have to wait 2 years for a release date in October 2023. So yeah, it had no closure. I felt gutted. I felt like someone stole my ice cream that I was so thoroughly enjoying, and then they just ran, and they just ran so far away. Okay. I mean, those are all the emotions I felt with the end of this movie. But regardless of the sudden ending, which in all reality is a great way to force you to watch Dune 2. Regardless of that, it was a really good movie. It was a really well produced movie. And I loved the space tech depicted. So much advanced technology, yet everything in a kind of medieval gothic setting. I mean, very cool. And how about those dragonfly helicopters? So here's the thing: how far away are we from some of that technology? Was any of the tech depicted attainable within our lifetime? Christopher Plain, the head science writer for The Debrief, wrote a detailed article on exactly that. And he's on the phone with me right now to tell us more about it. Hey Chris, welcome. How you doing?
I'm great, Christina. Thanks for asking. In the series, or in the book Dune, and later in the movie Dune, we do see a bunch of different futuristic technologies that were dreamed up by the author back in 1965, author Frank Herbert, when he wrote the novel, the original novel. I have asked and reached out to Kevin Grazier. He's a PhD scientist who was a consultant on Battlestar Galactica, as well as the Academy Award-winning film Gravity. And he edited a book called The Science of Dune to help me answer that question. Basically, we looked into 5 technologies shown in the movie. The first 4 had some elements of reality to them, and I'll cover those for you quickly. First of all, if you've seen the movie, you know that people use personal shields. They're basically a force field that you wear on your belt that builds around your body while you're fighting in hand-to-hand combat. And it was pointed out at the time by Herbert that fast-moving objects like a missile or a bullet or even a fired arrow would bounce off the shield. But a slow-moving object like a handheld knife or something could slowly move through the shield, penetrate the shield, and actually kill somebody. So I asked Dr. Grazier, is there something like this in reality? And I looked into the science to it myself. And what I found was some interesting proposals to make a shield, especially one that would build around a spaceship or a person or a city, but not necessarily one you could wear around your waist that would deflect bullets and missiles and arrows coming at you. One interesting note, Herbert wrote that at a time that the space program was pretty new on Earth. And one of the interesting things about returning from space to Earth is if you're going too fast or at too steep of an angle, you'll bounce off Earth's atmosphere. But if you're going slow enough at just the right angle, you'll ease right through the atmosphere. So I wonder if Herbert was influenced by that when coming up with the shield. The other technology I looked at was the still suit. in the movie Dune, the still suit is a suit worn by people, the Fremen and the other characters trying to survive the desert. And it works in three main ways. One, it collects the water your body loses from sweat, urine, and other bodily functions. It purifies that water and pulls the salt out of that water. And then it allows you to, it will filter it so you can drink that water. And then the third thing is, it's supposed to keep the wearer cool in the deadly Dune desert sun. As it turns out, all three of those aspects do exist in the space shuttles previously and in the space station. We have big refrigerator-sized equipment that filters out the water from sweat and urine and the other bodily functions and makes it so it is drinkable. We also have equipment that captures the salt and puts that back into the body system because, as we know, we have to keep our electrolytes balanced. And we do have suits that keep the wearer cool, specifically space suits that astronauts use that are often bulky and heavy have built-in air conditioning systems to keep them cool. The unfortunate thing was you couldn't combine all three of those technologies into one suit just yet, since so many of them are huge and bulky. So the idea of a still suit has some basis in science, but in 2021 we definitely couldn't build one. A third interesting technology was the weapons of sound. Now, I will point out here that that isn't something that appeared in the original book. Frank Herbert never talked about a weapon of sound. He talked about the weirding way being a form of martial arts. Well, when David Lynch made the 1984 adaptation Dune into a movie, he said, and he's famously quoted as saying, "I don't want to do kung fu on the sand." So basically, he said, how do I replace the weirding way, a special skill of martial arts or fighting that the Bene Gesserit witches have and train, and Paul, our hero, Atreides, is trained in. What he came up with was the weirding module, a device, again, that's only in the movie, that takes the power of sound and converts it into a weapon that in the film we see smash bone, smash stone, and obliterate people. So, once again, I looked into, do we have weapons like this? What's interesting, Cristina, is that the debrief, we've actually reported on a number of accounts of American diplomats serving overseas suddenly becoming violently ill. And when we looked into the symptoms, it was determined it was most likely caused by ultrasonic sound waves, but most likely being weaponized and specifically pointed at our people serving overseas, at our diplomats. That technology or those attacks has been termed Havana syndrome because it originally happened to people, or was originally reported to diplomats serving in the Cuban capital of Havana. I also found a very current technology in 2018 that's still in development using similar ultrasonic sound waves, but to pulverize rocks, specifically in mining operations, where they're trying to pulverize really dense, really hard rocks. And they were finding that ultrasound doesn't grind down or wear down like tools and bits, and was very powerful in this area. It's still in development. But basically, I determined that if you put all three of those technologies together, that you could, in theory, if you put these components together into a weapon, you could, in theory, refine a weapon that can make people sick, as well as shatter bone and shatter stone, just like the weapon in that movie. So I don't know that we can 100% build one, but we're definitely getting close. Among the technologies I covered in this article, Cristina, one is known as the ornithopters. And basically, if you've seen the movie or read the books, These are the spaceships they use to fly around while they're on Dune. And if you look at them, they look like houseflies. Some of them look like dragonflies or even birds. And that's because they use the process of flapping their wings like a bug or a dragonfly or a bird does, as opposed to a fixed wing aircraft. Interestingly, in researching that, of all of the technologies shown in Dune, ornithopters are not only the most realistic, they exist. Harvard built one that works called the Robo-Bee, and you can look it up. It's linked to in my article. And another one was built by another university that also flies like a dragonfly with the multiple wings, the two layered wings like a dragonfly. When speaking to Dr. Grazier, my consultant on this article, he did point out to me that ornithopters have a lot of limitations, and most specifically is they're just super inefficient. The wing flapping is just an inefficient way to fly, and the wings just don't last because they go through so much stress that way. So of all the 5 technologies of Dune I covered in this story, the ornithopters are the most viable because we have them now, but unfortunately they're just not an efficient use of travel.
Chris, how about the technology of folding space and remote viewing applications as depicted? Where are we with cutting edge physics and such tech possibilities?
So I think one of the most interesting components that Frank Herbert came up with in his story is the idea of folding space. And what he basically envisioned was characters, more or less supernatural, superhuman characters that use the spice to guide the large cigar-shaped spaceships in the book and movie known as the Highliners between the star systems, because the Imperium in the book is a multi-star system empire. And if you want to keep that together, we know from all science fiction, you need faster than light travel if you're going to travel between the stars. The thing about folding space is, although it's not something scientists are necessarily currently working on, it seems to include 2 really interesting components. One is the ability of the navigator to essentially envision the distant location or the destination of the traveling ship, and then to use the power of the spice and their own mind to guide the ship safely to that direction by folding space over on itself. Again, what's really interesting, when I reached out to Kevin Grazier, the doctor, the PhD scientist who wrote the book, The Science of Dune, he made it clear to me that in his mind, folding space is just another way of terming what Einstein described as far as if you were going to use a warp bubble, if you were going to use a warp drive to condense space through general relativity. So the fundamental idea of folding space rests in 2 phenomena. One we're really familiar with is Einsteinian general relativity, and the other one I already mentioned is a sort of remote viewing. So is it possible that scientists in the future could combine those 2 things, and indeed we could find ourselves traveling the stars using a mechanism just like this? I wouldn't say it's likely, but I definitely wouldn't rule it out.
Chris, this is fascinating. Thank you so much, and I look forward to having you on again in the future.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Cristina.
This year really has been a roller coaster ride for the UFO topic. The first half of the year, we saw daily news reports, chat shows, and debates about the UAP pilot sighting videos, and even Luis Elizondo being interviewed over and over by all the big networks. Nobody was laughing, joking, or even snickering. My guest coming up after the break has been leading a serious charge to report only the facts. Tim McMillan, right after this.
Hi. This is Race Hobbs, head of programming at the new UNX Network, and you're locked on Shifting the Paradigm with the intrepid Cristina Gomez on the X.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you are in the future because you're listening to Cristina Gomez and Shifting the Paradigm.
Hey, it's Cristina. Have you visited the unxnetwork.com website yet? It's a new digital broadcasting radio station with a bunch of awesome shows in its lineup. From Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, Whitley Strieber's Dreamland, and Don Etker on The Dark Matter Show. And there's so much more to choose from and listen to. Also, right now, go and check out the live chat feature and talk with listeners from around the globe. That's the X, the UNX Network at unxnetwork.com. Welcome back. This is Shifting the Paradigm on the X, KUNX Digital Broadcasting Network, your portal for everything unusual, mysterious, unexplained, and on the fringes of science. I'm Cristina Gomez. My guest today is no stranger to unusual topics that cause paradigm shifts when you look into them deeply enough. From cutting edge scientific discoveries to futurism to the complex world of unidentified aerial phenomena. Having an extensive background in law enforcement, public speaking, and investigative reporting with such giants such as Popular Mechanics, Warzone, and Vice, Tim McMillan is the co founder and executive director of The Debrief Media, a company that is relatively new yet has built a solid reputation for credibility in reporting the facts and getting the scoop on some major issues right across the spectrum, from defense technology to government legislation on the UFO topic. Tim is my friend, and since March of this year, I have had the honor of working with him and the Debrief team as a producer and presenter for digital video content on their YouTube channel. Since then, I've lost count of how many times I've been asked to spill the beans on Tim's knowledge and experience. The perception being that the debrief is sitting on a bunch of groundbreaking secrets to do with the UAP situation in both government and military sectors. So tonight, let's get into it with the man who definitely has his finger on the pulse of many mysterious fields of interest to us here at Shifting the Paradigm, retired police lieutenant, Mr. Tim McMillan. Tim, welcome to Shifting the Paradigm. How are you today?
I'm doing great, Christina. How are you? It is a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to get a chance to catch up. I had to chuckle when you said people asking you to spill the beans because we're both so busy. We so rarely get to chat. So it's fun to actually sit down. This will be fun. We get to catch up.
Did you guys hear that? See, we don't pass all these secrets to one another.
Right, and it's not out of lack of love. I love Cristina. I love everything that you're doing. Shifting the Paradigm. It's such a fun show, and everything you do for us at the Debrief is just fantastic. But yeah, we're both, whether it's between college, work, kids, family. We're always so busy, so we don't get time to share all of the deep dark secrets of the UAP world and what's going on. So let's do it now.
Let's do it right now. And, for those who aren't familiar with the Debrief, your passion and your vision for starting it, can you give us an overview of the company and some highlights of reporting since it started?
Sure. Yeah, we founded the Debrief over a year ago. We're coming up on our 1 year anniversary. It was started by myself, MJ Benias, and Micah Hanks, which hopefully people are familiar with. They're kind of, frankly, much bigger names in the UAP topic than me. But a lot of us, and me and MJ, have been working together for a while with Vice on covering UFO news, covering interesting defense stories. And we just kind of got to a point where we said, let's do our own thing. And I think a lot of that was predicated by the fact that we felt like we were covering very serious topics, very serious stories that, similar to anything else you would find in mainstream media any day. Frankly, I think the implications being perhaps more significant than a lot of stuff people consider major news. But it was done under kind of a silly tone. We would get frustrated. We'd interview very senior defense officials, this type of thing, and then there'd be a silly photo of Tom DeLonge or a crazy headline on it, which not knocking any of the publications we were working for. It's just kind of they were fitting the niche and the brand that they had for themselves. And so we said, let's do something different. And so we decided to launch the Debrief, but not just focus on UAP or kind of the interesting fringe stories, if you will, but rather let's talk about breakthrough frontier science technology in a different way than I think it's being presented for the most part, which is just for everybody. I think that a lot of times you see when it comes to new science, new technology, it's either in very highbrow publications where these are people, very technical people who are in the field are probably your main audience. And for the average person, they kind of get lost in the weeds there, or it's very lowbrow and it's very clickbait and it's sensationalized and perhaps the facts are slightly distorted. We wanted to kind of split the middle where we could make something fun, edgy, rebelliously curious. That's our motto. But yet also honest, genuine, and to be able to report on stuff like UAP under the same precedent that you would see in any major publication, the same editorial standards, the same rigorous scrutiny that you would see in any type of mainstream investigative journalism period. So that's what we did. We decided to go out there and launch it, and we've been very fortunate. This first year, we've been able to both add some really fantastic people to this group, like yourself, like Chrissy Newton, Chris Plain, who've come in and kind of formed that core team with us, along with a fantastic group of contributing writers, and most importantly, a really nice, robust reader base, and which continues to grow. And so we're very thankful for that, because now we have readers and viewers now, thanks to people like yourself, who contributed to the YouTube channel.
And
but that's kind of the origin.
And it's really made a big impact, and it's very upbeat and original. And the debrief has grown rapidly and become recognized as a media platform with integrity and credibility. And what do you think is the main reason behind that? What is the debrief doing differently compared to other similar online media platforms?
Well, I think that I'd like to hope that we brought something to the table that wasn't being done before, in that we report on things with the same standards, the same rules of evidence, the same, precedent of how you handle sources, this type of thing that you would see in any type of major news outlet. So whether it's, the New York Times, Politico, Washington Post, anybody like that. Perhaps in some cases, it's actually, more stringent. So we bring that same kind of journalistic rigor, but to topics that often those larger outlets wouldn't want to touch, or when they do touch, they say, the UAP topic being the best example, they do it in more of a silly kind of tone. And I think because there's this underlying impression that this is not really a serious topic, that perhaps even at times that journalistic rigor slips or is allowed to kind of be reduced to what you were doing if they were reporting on, say, a political story, something like that. And so, hopefully, I think what people have appreciated from us is the fact that we take that same rigor that you would see in major news stories, big outlets, like The Intercept, these types of things, and take it to topics where those outlets just aren't covering them. And we do it honestly. We present it, fact-based journalism, and sometimes that's not always going to make everybody happy. And I say that because the other side of that spectrum is, especially if you're talking about the UFO topic, it can be more fan news, where everything is interpreted, where facts maybe aren't present, interpretations go in, and people kind of fit a bill to maybe, fill to a fan base, and it's more of an entertainment value. So hopefully, I think that the reputation we've gained is the ability to present these types of topics in a manner that's journalistic. We do it with rigorous reporting, and we aren't necessarily concerned with entertainment. So if we make people mad, it's not our intention by any means. We're just trying to bring the honest truth.
And the very first article you wrote for the debrief was titled "Scientist Proposes a New Theory for the Mystery of Consciousness," which makes sense to me because when you were in graduate school, I saw that your focus and research was centered on cognitive psychology, human consciousness, and perception. On the debrief over the last year, there have been quite a few articles on this topic, and some really appear to follow each other with an evolving trend. So, from graduate school to today, what, in your opinion, have been some of the most eye opening developments in the research of consciousness?
Sure. Yeah. No, what a great question. And you're right. That is something that I think it is my background. It is something that I enjoy. It's something that I kind of impregnated into the law enforcement when I was during my law enforcement career. I was an instructor in cognitive science and police sciences. And so, yeah, that's something that you're going to see more of coming up. And so if that's something that people are interested in, please do check us out, because that's something really in my wheelhouse that I enjoy. And I think that, it would probably be reckless to say what exciting new things do we know about consciousness, because psychology in particular and the cognitive sciences is this very interesting discipline where everything that you think you know that is self-evident fact today, probably a couple of years from now, 10 years from now, is going to be totally shifted. The discipline of psychology is very much I've gotten in trouble in grad school by saying it's very much like an art form than it is a science. And that's not to mean that there's not scientific rigor in the scientific method applied to many of the studies. It just means that the human behavior, the human mind, is still such a mystery that you kind of got to plug in the art form of what makes the most sense, but yet that's not universal. So it's not like mathematics. It's not like, hard Newtonian physics where you can write an equation and solve someone's behavior every single point at a time. For me, I think the interesting things that are coming out of cognitive science is the realization that reality is not nearly as defined as we like to think it is. It is not a static state, and this comes not just from subjective studies, where you're doing observational studies, but rather neuroscience. So we have some hard data behind it, showing things that I think Dr. Carl Friston, who we actually interviewed recently, Chrissy Newton did for her show on YouTube, Rebelliously Curious. He's fascinating. One of the top scientists in the world, not just in cognitive science, but he's a neuroscientist. And, he brings up some very valid points in terms of the neuroscience here, in that all indications are is that reality that we see around us, what you're looking at right now when you're listening to me, is a product of our brains narrowing the focus, or neural gating. So you're taking all these stimuli and you're forming a picture in front of you. However, there's all this other stuff around you that your brains just kick out. And that's fascinating when you really think about it. I think that I have often said that the cognitive aspect of the UAP topic is something that fascinates me, because it brings into this idea of how would we perceive and interpret something that's truly anomalous. Because there's a ton of stimuli that are around us at different times that we just don't perceive. And so those kind of research studies are fascinating. Looking at that, I think some of the studies we've done a lot on psychedelics, and I think that is equally a really fascinating aspect that bleeds into conscious studies. Simply because we're seeing when people take psychedelics, what's happening now. We understand what happens in the brain, in the thalamus, which acts like a gatekeeper in the brain, and it just kind of throws open this gate, and suddenly you're able to perceive all these other stimuli that normally are just considered extraneous and kicked out. And so, if someone takes psilocybin or LSD and they see a floating purple elephant, that doesn't mean that there's a floating purple elephant really in our environment at all times, but it means there is some stimuli, and that purple elephant is really your brain's best way of perceiving whatever that is. And so very much so, I would say that what we understand about consciousness and reality, it's kind of like a paranormal science in a way, simply because there's so much that's unknown. And frankly, this idea that there could be stuff, stimuli is how we would say it scientifically, that are around us in our environment at any given time that we can't see. And it sounds like ghosts and all these other things. I don't know. But I think that it's extremely fascinating. I would say that consciousness and space are really the two great mysteries that face us. And I'm not sure that they're mysteries we're going to solve anytime soon, but that work towards solving them is really, really exciting. And it may be, or I would say, if history is any precedent, it's very likely that everything that we consider to be self-evident fact today will be ruled totally nonsense 2,000 years from now. People will look at us and go, oh, they thought that, similar to how we might look back and people who said that the sun rose every day because, the sun god carried it behind his chariot. So I think there's still, the exciting thing when it comes to cognitive science is the realization that there's still really just this endless stream of mysteries out there waiting to be solved.
I mean, consciousness is such a mystery. And now, with quantum research coming to the forefront of it, I think we will be seeing a lot more revelations in the near future. Okay, so you yourself write articles about defense, science, UAP, and the intelligence community. With your extensive background as a police lieutenant, serving nearly 2 decades in law enforcement as an instructor, a behavioral analyst, criminal intelligence analyst, and even a canine handler. How has all that experience shaped the way you deal with getting the deep details on topics that seem so complex and full of red tape and legislative shenanigans?
Sure. Great question. I think, we'll take it from a couple approaches. First, when it comes to the UAP topic, because I often tell people, my reporting and what I stick to my lane and what I know and what I'm familiar with and what I think that where my experience suits best, which is mostly reporting on what is coming out of the Department of Defense, the military, the intelligence communities when it relates to UAP, UFOs. That's because I kind of, that world is familiar to me. It's comfortable to me. For many years, I worked with different federal agencies, the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, all these people. And so I understand a lot of the bureaucracies and the intricacies that go into the federal service. And I've often said that that's very important to understanding the defense side of the UFO topic or the Pentagon side of it, because I think at times people interpret behaviors, language, or things that have come out of the Pentagon that they perhaps at times place more significance on it than they should, simply because whatever language is being said or whatever actions are being done, that's just typical bureaucratic minutia, or it's just the kind of idiosyncrasies that go on in that really regimented kind of atmosphere. And at the same time, the people might overlook things that are really significant because it doesn't seem that big of a deal, but when you're in that environment. And so I think I lean hard on that experience. And I've been fortunate because with that background, it's definitely helped me in being able to make contacts, make sources, gain trust of people that they respect the fact that, my intentions are good. I'm not here to do harm. I'm not some foreign spy trying to steal secrets. And I'm also equally not trying to get anybody in trouble and push an envelope that would compromise national security, that kind of thing. And I speak the same language. That's it's always been comfortable. Somebody that people would be very familiar with, Luis Elizondo, who formerly ran ATIP and has been a big stable fixture on the UAP scene in the last couple of years. Him and I, the times we've chatted, off the record, or I should say, just personally or on the phone, or even if we're doing an interview, we can kind of speak the same language, because though we came from somewhat dissimilar backgrounds, with his being the military side of things and me being the domestic side of things, we have similar personality traits. We have similar languages. We can kind of speak this same tone. And so I think that that's aided me and helped me when it comes to pursuing the stories and looking at information that you dig up. I try to apply those same standards that I did in law enforcement. For a period of time, I was also a violent crimes investigator. So, investigating anything from rapes, robberies to murders. And when you're doing that, you're collecting evidence. You're trying to prove something beyond any reasonable doubt that you're going to take into the court of law. And so I try to apply that same methodology, frankly, because it's the only methodology I know, towards investigating these topics. And in this instance, I'm presenting the case. The jury would be the public. So it's in the court of public opinion. But I still try to maintain that, which is it's a fine line to walk through, because oftentimes when you're trying to, if you're talking to anybody inside the Pentagon, there's oftentimes that, they are prohibited from speaking on record. They're prohibited from perhaps even being named on background, which is just a nice way of saying when you see articles or different news outlets attribute, we spoke to a defense official. And so that makes it tough. You have to weigh those options, because unlike the court of law, where you can call somebody to the stand and they can testify, you've got to try to make sure that you handle everything on the back end, with your editors and everything, verifying this information is accurate before you present it. But I would say those are all of my experience very much plays a part in everything I do, in hopefully presenting people with factual, really key information about topics, which hold perhaps a really big significance. The same way, and it's very interesting. I'll say that much, Cristina, because at times it is harder to prove a case, especially with something like UFOs, than it was to even present a case for homicide to a jury. Oftentimes we're just kind of understanding when you consider the overarching implications of what UAP could represent. It's harder to prove that than it is convict somebody for murder. Maybe that's a not so great testament to the American criminal justice system, but that it's true. There's times when someone could be convicted on testimony alone. A jury judges that, where I think with this subject, testimony alone doesn't suffice. So it's a delicate, difficult balance, I will say, but it also definitely guides everything that I do, and guides how I approach things. And there's certain topics and areas that, especially with UAP, that I think people wish that I would pursue more. But I look at that from the onset going, okay, the ability to prove this, the ability to apply that type of rigor to it at this point in time is very, very difficult. So, energy is better spent elsewhere. I think perhaps that frustrates people because they want me to jump right in and roll out the Roswell bodies. And if I had them, Cristina, I would roll them out, but I don't.
That's a very interesting comparison that you did, but regardless, you're really well equipped with that background to not only be trusted and reliable, but to communicate it all very well. This year, we've seen a lot of unprecedented developments with the acknowledgments by the government to the public that there is a serious aspect to the UAP mystery, including the threat of air collisions and near misses with unknown craft, and them demonstrating disruptive technologies. What are your thoughts on the ongoing stance of these objects representing a potential threat?
Sure. No, I understand that. I think that people get upset by that. I think that I read that on Twitter, or I hear that a lot. People get upset by the idea that I think that, there's even this underlying theme that there's a false flag operation. The government's going to decry that there's an alien menace here to bolster the military industrial complex, that type of thing. Again, going back to kind of my background and experience, I understand what's being said there when it says it's a threat. And when you come from the intelligence community, you come from particularly the defense and national security intelligence world, any unknown is a threat. You hate unknowns. You hate not knowing anything because that's not very intelligent. And that, by definition, it is intelligence. And so I understand that this idea that if something is unknown, that is a threat potential. That's something I agree with. And I think that what we have heard, what we have seen from, for example, the report that was released by the UAP task force in June, or comments that we've heard from lawmakers, the idea that you have something that is apparent mechanical devices of unknown origin that are operating, and you don't have any intelligence on them. You don't know where they're coming from. You don't know what their intent and motivation is. Is there a threat potential there? And I'd say absolutely. Does it mean that it is inherently a threat, as in it's just biding its time planning to attack? No. It just means that potential exists there, because whatever it is, you have no means of stopping it. It evidently can penetrate all of your air defenses. You're entirely vulnerable to that. So if that is, some type of near peer potential foreign adversary, obviously that's problematic. If it's, especially if it's a country that perhaps wants to kind of take the world stage, and who knows what, want to invade the United States. This is something that seems very foreign to Americans, given that America has never been, the United States has never been invaded. I guess the Native Americans would beg to differ with that, justifiably. But I think the threat potential exists there. It is there. And I think even if it is, let's say that what our military aviators or the average public has been
Yeah.
seeing for decades is
Tim,
alien.
we've
Oh.
come up against a break. This is so fascinating. Don't go anywhere for
Mhm.
those that are listening or watching. We will be right back.
Hi. This is Race Hobbs, head of programming at the new UNX Network, and you're locked on Shifting the Paradigm with the intrepid Cristina Gomez on the X.
This is Jimmy Church of Fade to Black, and you are in the future because you're listening to Cristina Gomez and Shifting the Paradigm.
Hey, it's Cristina. Have you visited the unxnetwork.com website yet? It's a new digital broadcasting radio station with a bunch of awesome shows in its lineup. From Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, Whitley Strieber's Dreamland, and Don Etker on The Dark Matter Show. And there's so much more to choose from and listen to. Also, right now, go and check out the live chat feature and talk with listeners from around the globe. That's the X, the UNX Network at unxnetwork.com. Welcome back. I'm talking tonight with Tim McMillan of The Debrief on some fascinating topics. Tim, go in more depth about what you were talking about.
Sure. Yeah, we were discussing this threat potential, the idea that UAP possess a threat potential, and I was just going to say, in kind of closing that out, is that the idea that UAP could be alien or let's say non-human, because I think there's a lot of theories that float out there. It could be interdimensional, all sorts of different things. I'm of the frame of mind that anything's on the table till it's not. But let's suppose that this is some type of non-human technology. So this isn't a foreign adversary, which interestingly enough, the intelligence community seems to be saying that's their leading belief. Um, Even if whatever people are seeing now or have been seeing for decades has no overt or covert threat towards humanity or Earth, the mere fact that something else possesses this technology means that the threat potential exists out there. I.e., it doesn't matter if the aliens that are here now have nothing but benign intentions and they are just floating around and evidently don't want to chat, but just want to keep an eye on people. But if they have that technology, then what's to say that another other alien race, another non-human species, doesn't likewise have one that is perhaps more violent and has more maligned intentions that comes along. We would hate to understand exactly what's going on or what is, how could we potentially defend ourselves from such superior technologies. We'd hate to find that out when the Klingons come in to invade. So I totally understand where that comes from. I think that to some degree, some people put more weight on that in believing that that means that these specific instances are necessarily a threat, as in a military threat. That's not even, that's kind of discounting the fact that, as you mentioned, the risk to air safety. So if you've got any objects out there that you're unaware of, the potential for collisions, mid-air collisions, is there, and that's a concern. And I think I wrote a series back in June, Devices of Unknown Origin, where I interviewed Ryan Graves, one of the pilots who was involved in the 2015 Roosevelt events off the East Coast, and that was something that's very significant to him. That was part of the reasons for him coming forward, is his safety, the safety concerns for his fellow aviators who were in the air. The fact that there were these airborne objects that pilots were unaware of, they were not supposed to be there, and the potential that pilots could collide with these things, whatever they were. That was a big factor in why he ever came forward with this. It wasn't necessarily to share that UFOs were real. It was to try to provoke the powers that be to take this seriously. And I commend him for that, because I do believe he's correct there. He certainly, we have a bad habit, and I say we in general as humanity, have a bad habit of not getting on the ball and trying to solve a problem before it becomes a problem. So I would hate that this became a serious issue only after there was some type of collision or something like that. And perhaps there already has been. That's the thing, is there are certainly there have been aircraft accidents and tragic accidents for as long as there's been air flight. Some of those unsolved. Is the likelihood that it ran into something like a UFO? I don't know. That's something I can't answer, but I know that there are at least a limited number of cases where you do have people seeing anomalous things and then the loss of aircraft. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's airspace we all travel and fly in, and therefore I think that the topic itself should extend beyond just being a military issue, but rather a much broader issue for that very reason.
Well, it's not only the military that's looking into it, but the internet lit up in public news forums and in UFO discussion groups when NASA Administrator Bill Nelson recently spoke up during a press conference about his thoughts and ideas regarding the UAP mystery and NASA's role in finding answers. He also saw the classified portion of the UAP report to Congress before he made those statements. What was your take on his choice of words and statements in general? And were you surprised at his candidness?
Well, yeah, I think anytime you see somebody, especially a senior official, like a director of a government agency, being so candid about the topic, I think that's surprising. I would say that that's probably very likely a result of whatever, like you mentioned, that he has seen or has been briefed on. And so that's interesting because I think that the biggest takeaway there is it further solidifies the fact that there is, you know, we haven't seen maybe all of the evidence that people in the government or the classified systems have captured on these things. However, those who have seen it certainly think that this is something that is significant and real and a topic of serious discussion. I think that that further solidifies that. His comments were interesting. I think a lot of people latched on because he mentioned that there had been, I think, 300 incidents since 2004. I don't know if that was an accurate number or whether that was just him kind of throwing a random number out there to demonstrate that this has been an ongoing problem. Whether it was 144 that were mentioned in the June UAP report. And to me, 144 and 300 are really inconsequential. That's a lot. If you have more than just even the two that we're aware of, in the 2015-2004 events where we've heard from those pilots, that's a lot. And so it's worth scrutiny. I think that it's encouraging because unlike what we've seen so far out of, let's say, the Director of National Intelligence or the Pentagon, areas in the military defense and intelligence communities, their primary concern is national security, intelligence, defense. The idea that you have objects that are able to, you have no means of stopping and represent a complete and utter vulnerability to national defense. That's something that those communities are not going to talk about. Like, that's not going to be something that you're going to see them come out and say, oh, yeah, we don't know what the heck that was. But, man, sure, it flew in and shut down all our nukes. And, man, whew, that's crazy. They're not going to do that. That's not, vulnerabilities in national defense are something that are just universally not discussed by any government for fairly obvious reasons, because it's not only pointing out your own deficiencies, but it's pointing them out to potential adversaries. You're saying, hey, I'll leave the key to the front door underneath a rock. And so you're not going to hear that. But with NASA, this is a scientific institution. Their primary function is supposed to be science and the exploration of aerospace and the greater space and beyond. And so I think that that's promising. I think that Nelson, not only being candid about it, but being candid about it in that he wants NASA to look into it is promising because it represents scientific inquiry into the problem. And when it comes to science, it's the exact opposite of the defense communities. Science thrives on open, peer-reviewable information, conclusions, and data that can be shared publicly and verified. And so, I think that when it comes to the ability of the public to get a better understanding of what exactly is going on, it is going to be from those academic and scientific institutions, such as NASA, where we will get that. Unfortunately, NASA has, unfortunately for us, NASA has access to a lot of classified types of systems and things, and they do work with the Department of Defense. And so there's certainly things that they're not going to share per se, but I think the potential there that we could see NASA produce maybe some better evidence or some evidence that I think would, people who are on the fence are very highly skeptical of this whole thing. Maybe that's where the best answers could come from, would be someone like NASA.
I sure do hope so. But regardless, the UAP topic is a controversial one, even down to the polarization of whether to refer to the objects as UFOs or UAP. It's without a doubt a topic that is very complex, having bizarre aspects such as demonstrating extremely advanced handling of the laws of physics, to connections with cattle mutilations, an interest in our planet's nuclear technologies, even so far as to alleged abductions of citizens around the world. Where do you see everything going? Based on your insights and connections, what do you believe we could see coming to light in 2022?
Oh, man. I'm gonna have to remote view that one. I don't, yeah, that's a good question. And I've come to be very comfortable with accepting I don't know, Christina, because every time I interpret what could be coming, or every time that I've heard different things that are in the works or different things that are in play, those either come to fruition, and then maybe they come to fruition larger than I expected. The June report being one of them. I did not expect it. I know a lot of people were disappointed because they wanted the videos and the pictures and all this stuff, and having some experience in reading or even producing similar intelligence reports, not on UAP, but I knew that was not going to happen. We weren't going to roll the Roswell bodies out. We weren't going to deliver a bunch of photos and images. But the fact that they went into more detail, or as much detail as they did, even though it may have been limiting to some, I was very surprised with. So it's difficult for me to predict it. I think it's interesting that it's certainly not a topic that's going to go away anytime soon, at least in these very serious discussions going on at high levels within the government. Now, I know that the people who have been following this topic, the people who are enthusiasts of the UFO subject for many, many years, perhaps that process is not moving as fast as they would like. There are quite a number of people who are, where's disclosure? Where are they going to roll out and tell us all the truth? And the government works slow on everything, frankly. So I can't give you a timeline for that type of thing. Down to the fact that I'm not even sure that the government truly knows what the heck they're dealing with. But I think that when we've seen things such as the Armed Services Committee now, prior to this, it was the Senate Select Intelligence Committee. So the group of lawmakers who are tasked with oversight of the intelligence community. So the 19 different agencies involved in the U.S. intelligence community. But now when we saw the Senate Armed Services Committee, so this is the group of separate lawmakers who are in charge of the Department of Defense, the defense community, when they add in legislation ordering the establishment of a UAP office, it's a fairly big deal. And I'm not sure it goes back to what we talked about earlier about, understanding kind of the bureaucratic minutia that goes in here. I'm not sure people understood how big of a deal that was, but that's a pretty big deal, because now you're establishing a permanent entity. The task force previously that had been authorized by the Undersecretary of Defense, task forces are temporary entities that are set up to kind of solve a problem. They're ad hoc. They come together and then they break apart. They oftentimes don't have appropriated funding, anything like that. They're just set up for a very finite amount of time. But when you're talking about a UAP office, now you're talking about a more permanent fixture. I think more akin to what people may have thought that ATIP or OSAP was when it was originally discussed. So this is like a permanent thing. That's fascinating. I think that's what's interesting, is that whatever the information that's being shared with lawmakers in classified closed door settings, whatever is being captured is enough that lawmakers are willing to go on the record and state its significance, and furthermore put together some resources in place to try to figure out what's going on there. And I think that's a bigger deal than people realize, especially, maybe it's exciting to hear the Pentagon talk about it, but when you have lawmakers, public perception and how they're viewed by the public is huge, because they have to secure votes. If they want to stay in power, they have to secure votes. So they're everything that they say, every interview that they agree to do, whether it's on Fox News or CNN, this is all approved by a team of people who are examining, is this going to come back and bite us when we run for re-election? And so the fact that, you have people such as Senator Marco Rubio, who was a former presidential candidate, and frankly, young and a well-known national figure, somebody who could easily perhaps run for president again. For him to go on the record and discuss this topic and issue on multiple occasions on different news outlets, I think it's a big deal, because it's important that people realize that means that his political team, his spokespeople, all of the people around him have viewed what's going on with this topic and determined that this is not a subject that's going to come back and bite us in the butt. This is not something that's going to make us look bad, and our political rivals are not going to make us look silly with this. And so that's significant. So even if a lot of the public maybe views the topic as contentious, The fact that you have politicians and lawmakers viewing it seriously, that's significant. And but I think that they have said actually very directly, which is kind of humorous, is that they're viewing this as a serious topic, and they're not here to entertain the Twitter world. They're here to take it seriously and examine it just like they would any other legitimate concerning issue that's facing national security. I foresee that it will be viewed as such. The downside to that means that, like any other significant issue, it doesn't necessarily translate into the public getting a lot of information unless they start requesting it. And I think that's one of the things that in my reporting that I would say has always been a big motivating factor, is that to me, this is the establishment of the United States, and the Constitution is supposed to function on the ability of the people to give their implied consent to how they're governed. And so I think that hopefully, we'll see more people, and I think it's incumbent upon people to kind of ask for more information so that they can they can be informed, and therefore provide their consent. Because maybe once we are better informed, people, the average person on the street may say, no, I don't want just a UAP office. I want a UAP agency. Like, this is a much bigger deal than you have let on. And so I think that's the delicate balance. It's one of the aspects that we haven't seen yet. And I hope, from a journalist side, that it's something that I want to push, because I think that the people do deserve to be informed and therefore give their consent to that. Now, can I predict that in the coming 2022? No. Yeah, part of me wants to say nothing's coming, because whatever I say is coming is the exact opposite happens. And so therefore, Biden's going to roll out the Roswell bodies in 2022.
Well, I mean, I am excited for what's coming, given so much that's happened in 2021. Now, in June, you wrote about China also has a UAP task force, as well as Japan. Do you think that it is because they're having their own military encounters with these objects was that a surprise to you to learn about their investigations?
Oh, it was a surprise that they were talking about it. I think that there's probably a lot of countries. I would be surprised if every major country didn't have something, in place. Particularly, I think the other power who has been remarkably silent on all of this would be Russia, and it would be kind of astonishing if they didn't have something in place. But it was surprising they were talking about it. I wasn't necessarily surprised that they had something in place. I think the most surprising thing was the fact that they not only, it came out through Chinese state media. So this is something that's kind of, unlike in the United States, these are media organizations that are controlled by the state government. So there's going to be a presentation of what they want put out there in the media into the masses. But the fact that what they wanted to present was not only that they weren't establishing one, they were saying, oh, no, we've had one for several years. And in fact, described it as a very comprehensive and endeavor where they had multi-layers of how they investigate these sightings. And their reasoning and basis behind it, they said, was that they had seen an uptick, an increase in UAP or UFO sightings. They didn't kind of define whether that meant from the civilian populace or the military populace, but at the same time, those kind of bleed over. The same air that the military flies in is the same air that's above our heads. So we can kind of assume from that there's been an increase of sightings all across the board. I think that was intriguing and interesting, because that there's that same similar theme that's played out in the United States, is that the reason that this topic has been so much in the focal forefront can be attributed to people like Luis Elizondo or Christopher Mellon making it so, and putting it in front of lawmakers. But at the same time, there seems to be this implied and unstated implication that the advances in our own technologies, whether it's radar, air defense systems, different things where we're not using Doppler pulse radar, we're using continuous pulse radar systems, that this perhaps has created an increase in the ability to detect or observe these things. So, if that's going on in the United States, almost undoubtedly these same types of advanced technologies are going on in other foreign countries. And so it's either there's an increase of activity externally, so whatever is causing the activity is increasing, or the technologies that we're employing today are better suited to pick up whatever these are. And it is interesting. It is interesting to see China describe it in very. I think it's almost kind of chuckle worthy, because China described it in the similar fashion the United States has, in that, well, we've had these things, we don't know what they are. Perhaps it's the United States. But the humor coming there is the United States is equally been like, well, we've seen these things, we don't know what they are. They could be China. So I've always said that maybe it would be very interesting to get. I think you would have to start inside locally with the Department of Defense and get all the heads of different agencies in the room, and it would be like that Spider-Man meme where everybody's pointing at each other, saying, "I thought it was you. Wait, it's not you. I thought it was you." But then to expand that onto foreign governments to the same type of format, where I think there's always going to be this idea that, well, yeah, it's weird. We don't know what it is. It doesn't seem to comport to known technologies, but it's probably them. And it would be interesting to get everyone together in an international format where there's this sudden realization, oh, wait, it's not you? Oh, man, geez. Well, what the heck is this? Maybe then we could get some real solutions and answers to these questions.
Most people know about the Galileo Project by now, which was initiated by Avi Loeb and was big news when the information was released that a Harvard professor was getting funding to create a project to look for intelligent life in the universe, as well as examining the UAP mystery and sightings. Now, we've just heard that Luis Elizondo and Christopher Mellon have signed on the effort. Were you surprised to hear about that development? And what do you think of the effort overall?
Sure. Was I surprised about the Galileo Project in general, or with Chris and Luis coming on?
Both.
Just to clarify. Both. All right. Yeah, let's tackle them all. No, I think I was surprised at the Galileo Project to an extent, simply because I had earlier in this year, I had spoken with Avi Loeb, Dr. Loeb, extensively just prior to the release of his book, Extraterrestrial. And in fact, I did a large feature article on this idea that his theory that Oumuamua could possibly be an artificial object of extraterrestrial origin, which is something highly contentious in the greater academic community. We spoke extensively and we talked about the UAP subject. And at that time, he seemed to, he kind of be like, I would say he took a very scientific approach, which I respect and understand, which was, yeah, show me the evidence type of thing. But while also saying, but at the same time, there part of science's job is not to determine, is to determine what's real or to make conclusions based on doing the work, doing the research, and coming out to what the results provide. And so he said there's nothing wrong with doing a scientific inquiry into this topic. And so it was interesting because he was open to it then, and but I wouldn't have foresaw that he would kind of be the catalyst to bring apart the Galileo Project, which we see today, which it is nice to see someone, and especially someone with Dr. Loeb's background, which is really extensive if you look into it. The longest running chair of Harvard's astronomy department, to say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to tackle this from a scientific perspective, and we're going to see what we can do. I think that is very encouraging. I've told people when it comes to public information and perhaps being able to publicly confirm UAP to people who haven't had their own experiences or haven't looked into the topic as much, or frankly are very skeptical of it, or I think that it's going to come from the scientific and academic communities is where you're going to see the evidence that would change people's opinion there. And so that's really exciting and encouraging. I think once we knew that the Galileo Project was off the ground and running, I think it came to I was more surprised that people like Christopher Mellon and Luis Elizondo weren't already involved in the project early on. I think it's kind of a natural fit there for them to be somehow involved in it as research fellows and this type of thing. Given the fact that on Christopher Mellon's side of the fence, he's been very actively involved in the political aspect of it, which we've seen be highly successful, in the creation or at least acknowledgement of the UAP task force and now the push for UAP office. But then you have someone like Mr. Elizondo, who has pursued and chased this topic with passion and vigor, both inside the Pentagon and since outside, presenting it to the public and saying that this is something real, that's something we need to take serious. So it's kind of a natural fit. I was surprised that it didn't happen sooner, quite frankly. I'm encouraged. I'm excited. I have, we at the Debrief have a really good relationship with the people on the Galileo Project, including Dr. Loeb. And we're excited to kind of report on what they're going to be doing, what results they capture, and when they really get up and rolling and looking out there and seeing what they can see and seeing what we capture. That's what we need. We need that. Everybody wants that hard data. They want that all of those radar images, all of those really high definition images that show us that something is truly anomalous, and we're not just interpreting anomalous from a low information zone. And so I'm excited to see where that shakes out.
I agree with you with that. I mean, it's insane how far we've come and what the future holds for us. Tim, we've come up against the end of the show. I want to say thank you so much for joining me here today. And it went by way too fast, and we're going to have to do this again in the near future. Thanks to everyone for being with us here tonight. Next up is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the X. So don't go anywhere, and I'll see everyone here again next Tuesday. Remember, keep your eyes on the skies.